Hi, I'm Alana Dudek. I'm the National Organizing Director of People for the American Way, and I'm joined here by my colleague Fritz, also on staff at YEO.
Yeah. Hi, Fritz. I'm the engagement point of the Young Elected Officials Network. And I'm really excited to say that, well, actually, it's kind of unfortunate because no matter what I say, I don't think any amount of compliments could really do today's guest justice. Um, we're joined by the one and only Zaynab Mohamed, state senator coming to us out of Minnesota. She represents the 63rd district comprising Southeast Minneapolis. Zainab is tied with two other wonderful state senators, Aaron Quaid and Claire Verbetten, who, Zainab, thank you for introducing me to her, who are the first Black woman elected to the Minnesota Senate. And Zainab doesn't have to share this title with anyone. She is the youngest woman ever elected to serve in the Minnesota legislature. Um, you've been recognized domestically and internationally as an advocate for your community, something that I think you've had to do a lot more of than any state representative should need to. Um, and I'm not going to get too much into that right now because it's a big part of what we're talking about later. But without further ado, Alana and I are honored to have you on today, Zainab, and it is always a pleasure to hear the sound of your voice, even if it is halfway across the country. So, Zainab, how are you doing today?
Thank you, Fritz. It's good to be here with you and Alana. I'm so happy to be here. I've been looking forward to this. So I'm so happy we're able to find the time to do this. And I'm doing well today. I'm doing great.
Awesome. Well, we're always happy to hear that you're doing well. And so, yeah, I'll start things off with our first question. So, Zainab, here it comes. Be careful. It's a two-parter, so just, take your time. Was there any particular moment or like news item that you saw or like headline that you can sort of consider like a sort of origin point of your journey into public service? What sort of sparked that desire in you to put in all of the incredibly hard and sometimes grueling work that is involved in this world? And um, the second part is essentially how have you carried how is that motivation, how has that inspiration changed over time as you've spent time in elected office? Is it the same motivation you had before? Has the motivation changed? Obviously, lots of things have changed since you've entered office. So, um, yeah, what's your motivation and how has it changed over time and why do you do the hard work that you do every single day?
That's a really good and an important question. I would
Okay.
say I remember 6 years ago when George Floyd was murdered. I was on my bed. It was around 10 p.m. It was Ramadan and I was fasting. I was breaking fast with my family. And it was right after I broke my fast and I was just on my bed and I read this I like saw this video on Facebook from one of my friends who posted an activist. And I just felt so mortified. And I remember waking up the next day to the news that, a black man was murdered by the police department and it had to nothing to do with police violence or his rights being violated. It was simply that this man had some sort of an addiction and was not well. And being so furious and angry at the system, at people who hold elected power, at people who weren't speaking up. And that was sort of my calling to organizing and being in this work. And, that was sort of my calling to to public service, to wanting to do something for my community, to organizing. And from there on, I was outside um, organizing with my neighbors, protesting with them, making signs, bringing food to people who were outside. And since then, I think my desire to serve, my interest has only gotten stronger. I think my first year when I was elected was sort of like a really solid, healthy year where we got the majority and got a lot done. And I was fighting a lot for our immigrant communities. I passed driver's licenses for the first time in our state in 20 years, which was a 20-year fight that communities have been wanting, a historical piece of legislation. We passed paid medical family leave. I was a co-author on that bill. Like we did really incredible things. And then from there on, our leader had died from being sick, which was really hard for me because I was really close with her. And then, she had to step down and later on died. But then 6 months later, the political assassination happened. The mass shooting at Annunciation, which is in my community, my neighborhood, my district, happened where we lost Harper and Fletcher. And then all of the things from Metro Surge, which majority of those things happened in our community, in our district. And like for me, I think over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, I've never been more I've never been more afraid for my neighbors individually, and I've never been more confident that collectively we're going to make it. And I think that's what makes me want to serve because I think collectively we'll be okay. As individuals, you can see where we are weak.
Thanks, Zaynab. Yeah, that's kind of beautiful the way you put it. But yeah, I just listening to kind of your radicalization moment or the moment that really stuck out for you is like I can't just, idly sit by anymore. Not that you probably were at that time anyway, but I remember working for People for started working right before the pandemic, and the pandemic happened. We were all at home, so I was already kind of involved, but then the murder of George Floyd, I remember like where I was, what I was doing, just kind of like sinking down to the floor and just like sobbing and being like, how can this keep happening? And like, and I guess everybody, I mean, I remember feeling almost empowered because it felt like the moment, like it felt like a no turning back, for a lot of people who had previously been disaffected or apolitical. So, it's crazy to hear, like it's been 6 years now. And
Yeah,
yeah,
and it's like something people have talked about over the years, right? Like in Minnesota, we talk about how there have been over 500 people that have been killed in the hands of police, and that communities have been protesting this issue for decades. And then now you see it in your face, broad daylight, a man with his foot, with his knee on this man's neck as he screams out for his mom.
I want to reiterate how great it is to have you on today and to be talking with you. You're such an inspiration, not only to YEO staff, but also so many of our own members. My question is this. Over the course of December 2025 to February 2026, the federal government sent thousands of untrained, unidentifiable, and seemingly merciless guerrillas into the state of Minnesota, which eventually obviously resulted in the tragic deaths of two nonviolent protesters, Renee Good and Alex Preddy, and the death of Victor Manuel Diaz in a detention center, as well as the detention and torture of thousands of humans. Minnesotans across the state, regardless of their political affiliation, were shocked, and public opinion of the operation quickly spiraled downward, eventually concluding. I want to know what it felt like to watch the administration target your heritage and the community that you come from, and how were you able to keep your poise, not let the BS get to you, and be a strong leader for your community in the face of such vicious adversity?
Um, you know, I've had some time to think about it over the last few weeks. As I've sort of been trying to slow down on work and get back to campaigning and sort of thinking about what it means to run for office again. What do you say to a community that's faced a number of persecutions by the hands of law enforcement, quote unquote, ICE agents, um, in the name of being Somali in our state? Um, uh, you know, it's hard because when I think about bullies, I think about people who often in school would attack the kids who are the smallest or who have the least amount of friends because they deem themselves as big and bad. And that's pretty clear, I think, in this administration. Somali people in Minnesota, in terms of numbers, we have 80,000 of us in the state and close to 200,000 nationwide. Almost all of them citizens. Only about 700 people who are on TPS, which also make them legal residents, but apparently not in the eyes of this administration. And so, like, for this administration to sort of take this position of wanting to attack this community, I think for me, it was clear that it wasn't really about us, right? Like, they were coming here to say they were going to arrest and deport all these Somalis because they're fraudsters, even though the states that commit that fraud happens most are states like Florida, where he is literally freeing people who have stolen billions of dollars from their Medicaid fraud. It became clear to me that it wasn't really about us immediately, and that like I knew Somali people had citizens. Whether they were going to be arrested for being citizen was a different story, but who was going to be the most vulnerable? Who were they going to attack the most? And to me, it was clear that it was other communities who didn't have legal residence, who had less protections. So it was about creating coalitions beyond government, because it was clear that government wasn't going to work. For me as a leader, it was about how do you work with community organizations and leaders to bring people together to say, if we're not going to be deported, but our name is going to be used to deport you, how can we protect you? And in return, how do we also make sure our community is protected? And then quickly, sort of, they were arresting everybody, whether you were a citizen or not, whether you had your papers or not, whether no matter what, whether you were running errands, going to school. They arrested a young lady, 19 years old, who I think had born in a city called Edina in Minnesota, who was running errands, and who later said that they sexually assaulted her on the way to the facility, as she kept telling them, I am a United States citizen. I am born in this country. And so for me, I think I found strength in the ways in which people in my community showed up and spoke up against the hate that was coming from the federal government. And I found a lot of faith in the ways we created systems that didn't rely on governments. And that meant if people were struggling paying for rent, we were raising that money to do it ourselves to make sure that they pay for rent. If they needed food, we were creating food drives. I started doing food drives via social media. And at first it was like 50 people. And then it rose to like 3,000, 4,000 people. It went from our small neighborhood people's houses and their Porsches to high school gymnasiums, and it sort of became this like incredible way for people to come together and to protect each other, to say, okay, what can I do? I don't have a title, I don't have power, but like I can bring diapers to the school where 5 families are going to be able to benefit from it. And so I think when I say like collectively, I never really worry about our community. That is what I mean, because it that gave me the idea of that as long as we come together in the face of hate and fascism, we'll be okay. We'll create systems to protect each other, even when government doesn't work, even when government is up against you and wants to dehumanize you. Um, but I think, there were also a lot of horrendous stories. There were many people we can say from being deported were citizens. There are still many people who were deported into countries that they're not even from. Just recently, I had a family reach out to me who said, we finally found our mother, and she was deported to like some country in Africa, and it isn't East Africa or Somalia, it's in some West Africa country. And they've been looking for their mother for months. Can you just imagine what that 70-some-year-old mother had been through, who immigrated to this country in the 1990s, who had a TPS, who her husband died because of cancer, who had to raise her children on her own, and then boom, her life is shattered and she's deported. Well, even though she's been working here and had been here for 30 plus years. And so I think those stories weigh on me the most. And I think a lot about those young children who are now becoming parents, their own younger siblings. That sort of worries me the most. But I think collectively we'll be okay. And I find strength in people. I find strength in doing this work the best I can. And I know certainly that I won't be able to sort of fix everything, but I have a voice. I have the power to make calls. I have the power to help somebody get an attorney. I have the power to call somebody and make sure that person who is in a facility, ICE detention facility, can get their insulin when if they're diabetic, or that family has a home they can rely on if their family member, like we have a lot of power, and sometimes we don't think about our position. We think about our positions as just policy centered, but for me it has become a way to organize people and to do more.
I love that. I love that a
With a
lot
long
because
answer, sorry.
no, that was awesome. That was awesome because I also feel like, and maybe, I don't know if you'd have anything to say on this, but it feels like a lot of our congressional representation is not taking that attitude of being able to organize and support their communities in ways beyond policy, in
Hmm.
organizing sense, in a
Hmm.
food drive, organizing food drives, organizing rent help, support collection situation. So this is kind of a follow-up question a little bit, I guess, but like, did you see support for some of these systems that you were built? To what extent? You know,
Hmm. I think very often when a constituent calls and says, hey, my mom's is deported, what do I do? you realize quickly, I don't have power. And then you sort of get to, I'm so sorry that happened to you. And you write them a letter, and that's sort of like the end of it. And they don't recognize that they can just call the attorneys that they know or call somebody who has an attorney and just do more as an individual without your political office. You'll have so many people who will answer that call because you're a state senator or a state representative, certainly if you're a congressperson. And part of it is laziness. And part of it is the fact that they still work from like the 1990s and not from a place where we work from, which is in the world of organizing and connecting people and building movements and finding different ways to help people, no matter what that looks like, and watching them go through that journey, whether at the end it's successful and that person has been deported, or you've been able to get that family together, right? Like, I've dealt with families who self-deported after finding them a home, bringing them back together, who said, we don't want to go through the system, Zainab. We're out. We're going back. Like, we don't want to deal with this. We've also dealt with families who come together. We've also, like not every one of these cases or issues is going to be successful. And so I would say when it comes to liberal institutions, I've relied often on some of the nonprofit organizations. That's been really helpful. But even they're under attack, right? 501(c)(3)s are under major attack depending on what they're doing. And so when an organization gets money to house people, and then they are like, okay, we'll house them, but we need them to pay the rent ahead of time because we don't want to deal with the legal liability of having to house undocumented people, right? That is a genuine legal liability for them. And at the end of the day, it doesn't serve that person. And so it often is like the mothers in the neighborhood who are raising money and finding systems and creating it themselves and bringing it together. And so it's like, what can we build that will stand time,
Yeah.
that will stand fascism and an authoritarian government?
We've obviously taken things down a pretty serious road. We can't really have a conversation about Operation Metro Surge without, touching on at the very least the senseless and unnecessary deaths of Alex Preddy and Renee Good, and the brutality that thousands of nameless people are currently being exposed to in ICE detention centers. So, the question is, what are you doing? What can we do to keep the people of Minnesota and the entire nation from forgetting about what happened there, and how can we keep their memories alive and what they represented, the memory of what they represented alive. What are you doing? And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think Alex Preddy and Renee Good represented um represented the idea of wanting to live in a free society where your rights and your freedoms aren't taken from yourself and your neighbors, and you're willing to do any and everything to protect them. They were like the thousands of people who were out there who were patrolling and making sure that when ICE agents go to our neighbors and they um, violate their constitutional rights, that they're there to record, to make sure that we know about this when history is written, because it will be. And I think history will be on their side. I would say to remember Alex Preddy and to remember Renee Good would mean telling their story about what happened. That the fact that she's an artist and a wonderful mother who her life was cut short for wanting to protect her neighbors. He was a nurse, um, and someone who deeply desired to care for their neighbors, who showed up early in the morning to do just that, whose rights were also violated and was murdered broad daylight. But most importantly, I think it's important for us to remember the ways in which this government spoke of them and smear their names in a way that is, in my opinion, really, um, what's the word? In describing them in inhumane ways for political reasons and not the honest truth of why they were there and the fact that they were peaceful. They're the best of us. And so I hope people across the country don't forget about what happened to them. The same way we'll never forget George Floyd, at least in our state, we'll certainly never forget Renee Good and Alex Preddy.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think it's also just, equally important to remember all the people that have died in these operations that weren't white protesters as well. I think that gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. So I always want to give name to that as well. And obviously, we've covered a lot of heavy topics today. I want to thank you for sharing what it's been like to endure some really traumatic experiences. And of course, no words can give us a realistic description and provoke understanding of what it was like to go through it. In the midst of it all, though, I'm sure there are some moments of joy and hope that we can lean on to help us through. So I was wondering if you could talk about something good that happened in your community recently. Could be personal, could be a bill or policy that you're proposing or sponsoring. Just one story that's cause for hope and inspiration in this moment.
Um, I think a lot about what Carrie Diesel said to me before she passed, which is be kind to people. You never know what people are going through in their personal lives. Um, and that's something I've thought about over the years. Today is June 15th. Yesterday was June 14th, which is the year anniversary since Melissa and Mark Portman were assassinated in our states. So it's a 1 year anniversary. And I think this last year I found moments of joy. Um, my last interaction with Melissa was her giving me snacks because I was dealing with two members who were just like a headache. And one of them is John Hoffman, which is really funny. And I think this past year, I just found moments to just be outside because Melissa loved gardening. She loved spring. She loved her garden. And I just found ways to just be outside, to garden sometimes, to go for a little hike. I'm getting into running, which is really fun. I like signed up for the full marathon this year, and I've actually found a lot of joy in running. It's really hard, but I found a lot of joy in that. And I've just been able to spend a lot of time with my family and my friends, and just sometimes just moments to plug off, to go away with your family and friends. And so, I think this past year has been really hard, but I found moments to be kind to people, even when I fundamentally disagree with them, because it's really important. And I found moments to be outside from Melissa, and I found moments to just be alone, and on my own by myself, which has just been good for my peace.
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean we all have to focus on the little things in our lives that we enjoy that can power us through struggles, that can power us through obstacles and
Yeah.
adversity. And yeah, whatever that looks like,
And if you wanted me to pass on a policy, I think I could just say, like, we passed a ban on assault weapons high capacity magazines, which came from the assassination of the shooting that happened at Annunciation. It didn't pass in the House, so we'll have to do it again next year. But it's a landmark piece of legislation for our state. Guns are a really, really hard thing to pass or to do anything about because we are such like a state that prides ourselves in hunting and people love their guns. But I'm really looking forward to getting that done, and I'm really proud of the work that we've done and the fact that we moved the needle forward. And it's going to be a huge topic this election cycle.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Totally. Well, thank you for sharing all that. As I just said, that was incredibly uplifting. And hopefully next year you're gonna get it done. We're gonna get that high capacity magazine ban. Um,
fingers
so yeah,
crossed. Brits.
just one more question for you,
Yeah.
Zaynab.
Mm-hmm.
And it might be the most controversial one I'll ask you
I'm
tonight,
scared.
but it also might be the least important. I need you to name one YEO you're excited to see at national convening, which, if you didn't know, is happening August 6th to August 9th in Los Angeles. And Zainab, you can only name one YEO, any YEO.
That's so hard.
I know.
There's so many.
You're right.
Oh my God. Why would you do that to me?
You come
Uh,
on this interview.
We're
You don't know what's
asking
gonna
the
happen.
hard-hitting questions.
I'm really excited to see the staff. Can I just say the staff? I get to
I'll
pick.
take it.
I am so excited to see the YEO staff. I'm really excited to see Raquel and Fritz and Alana. And like, I love the staff. Who cares about the members
That
and
was
the
said like a
electeds?
true politician. Not gonna really name a name. You're just gonna give it to the staff. That was smart.
I love the staff at YEO. They're the
Of
reason why
course.
I come.
Julian wants to know if you're excited to see him.
Absolutely. The only person I want to see.
Did you hear that?
And I
I
just
think you
want to
got
carry
it.
him around.
I think you got it. Yeah.
He's so cute.
Yeah, thanks for that. And one thing that you said stood out to me of what we really need to be relying on is our community. You know, mutual
Mhm.
aid is how we get through this time
Mhm.
and again. That's how we've always
Mhm.
gotten through it, and that's how we'll continue to get through it. Well, Zainab, it has truly been an honor to speak with you and to hear from you about your work. We cannot thank you enough for the time you have generously given us today, and we look forward to sharing this with the rest of the network. We're so grateful for everything you do for YEO, including holding babies, for your community, and for yourself, because you're a fighter and you work your butt off for your community, and you deserve every bit of praise you get.
I
So thank
appreciate you guys.
you.
Thank you
Yeah.
both so much. Thank you for bringing our baby to the interview.
Well, unfortunately, I would have preferred that he did not disturb us, but he was hungry, so here we are.
Julian's always welcome to disturb mine Alana's meetings. So,
He often does. He's like,
Amazing.
"Oh, I hear Fritz's name. Yum, 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 yum."
Yo, yeah.
He loves
Cute.
Fritz. He actually does love
well,
We
him.
all
Julian and
love
I, we had a lot
Fritz.
of bonding time at the Policy Academy. He was holding on to my finger for a lot of that. So,
Oh, cute. I love that. Well, I appreciate you guys. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your
Yeah,
Monday.
I'm so glad
yes.
that we were able to make this happen. Thank you so
Me too.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you
Zainab. You're the
guys.
best. Love it.
Bye.